affected by the recession and now by the debt ceiling fight, as consumer demand has dropped and stayed low. Some movement is beginning, but again, full recovery may be several years off. To tell us what's happening with business and business startups, Steven Stralzer joins us by satellite link from KLVX-TV in Las Vegas. He's a professor of entrepreneurship at the Thunderbird School of Global Management in Phoenix. Professor Stralzer, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
What's the current situation with business creation in Arizona and elsewhere while we're still on the heels of the recession and from the impact of the debt ceiling fight?
Well, I think what's happened with the debt ceiling fight is that it has really created an era of uncertainty. And one of the issues with the debt ceiling fight is that I think from a political standpoint, this could be kind of the gift that keeps giving to one of the parties, because this is going to come up again, and it's really, in my opinion, kind of the wrong approach in terms of trying to get economic lift for our economy. If we think about the economy as an airplane, for instance, and as you lose speed, you start losing altitude, and I think this move was more like push down versus pull up on the controls. In a lot of ways, it's really the wrong way to approach an economic recovery. So I think it's created uncertainty, some pause on the part of entrepreneurs to bet their savings, bet the savings of their friends and family in starting new ventures.
So what would you advise a small business or an entrepreneur who's about to start a business? What should they be doing right now?
Well, I think they have to make sure they get it right. And getting it right in most any entrepreneurial organization means being mindful of what it is we're doing for the customer. What's the value proposition for our product or service in the eyes of the customer, and to try to get some customer traction in advance or alongside of the launch. So in entrepreneurship terms, we talk about this as external validation. So you might have a great idea that you've been thinking about for years, and it's a great idea, but will the dogs eat the dog food? Is it a product or service that people are willing to write checks on or for? And so doing your homework and even testing it with customers, trying to get that early adoption of your product or service before you launch, mitigates the risk. And in this kind of environment, I think you've got to have the dogs eating the dog food before you launch.
One of the big drivers of the economy in the United States and in Arizona is consumer purchasing, but that's really depressed right now. So what can businesses do to either stimulate that or go away from being dependent on consumers to drive their business? Is there a category of business out there that can be successful in that atmosphere?
Well, I think a pure play retail new venture today, with consumer sentiment the way it is, and the lack of jobs. I mean, most retail stores require consumers to have money in order to go into the front doors. So retail concepts like new and used clothing or gently used clothing. There's a Thunderbird alum who is very successful in starting a company called My Sister's Closet that has really grown in spite of this economy, and her concept is to take gently used products, initially in ready-to-wear in clothing, but now in hard goods as well. So, thinking about, what your product offering is in terms of the environment that is, pretty constrained in terms of disposable dollars. The other issue is, looking at low barriers to entry kind of businesses where the investment is not very large. So a lot of software businesses today are relatively, low in cost in terms of entering the market, and social media and, some of those sorts of startups, organizations, startups that can also increase productivity for other people. So there's a firm in Chandler called Infusionsoft that is really a marketing tool for small businesses. So it improves the marketing function of a small business. So whenever you can improve the productivity of an organization, I think you've got an entry point, even in spite of kind of depressed economic times that we have right now.
Now, you've made reference to a couple of businesses that were started by people with great ideas that they carried through, and you teach that at Thunderbird. You teach entrepreneurship. What drives that?
Right.
Is it an innate talent, or is it a skill that can be learned? How does that work?
Well, I mean, so far, even though we've mapped the human genome, we haven't identified the entrepreneur gene. So, entrepreneurship, in my observation, is something that is sort of imprinted. I think people see other entrepreneurs and they emulate that. So, yet there is sort of this spark that you really need, this fire in the belly that, frankly, it's hard to teach. What we can teach in a classroom, though, are the tools that will make the launch process, the ramp up, maybe easier, and as well as reducing risk. So I teach a course in writing a business plan, and in that course we cover all the different elements of starting a new venture. And more than anything, this process serves as a learning tool so the entrepreneur understands where the potholes are, where the minefields might be, and can plan around it. So it's really, I think it's very difficult to really teach somebody to have that spark and passion, but it's definitely needed to be successful. Because after all, you're going to be working maybe 20 hours a day on your new idea, your new venture. It better be something that you really care about.
So does that automatically preclude the idea of entrepreneurship in existing or welling up in big established businesses?
No, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting because I teach in the executive MBA program at Thunderbird, and that program is really targeted, always has been targeted to corporate executives. And for years, that program has never offered any sort of look at entrepreneurship because, after all, the big corporation is footing the bill for one of their top employees, executives, to attend Thunderbird. They don't want to be teaching them the skills to go out and start their own business. But that kind of thinking has really changed over the last several years, and now entrepreneurship is a core part of the executive MBA program. And for good reason, because what keeps CEOs and top-level executives awake at night are not the competitors that they know that are already out there. What keeps them awake at night are the guys and gals in the garages that are building the next Google. They're going to eat their lunch, not the incumbents that have been around for a while. So we see a strong interest on the part of large, complex organizations to really embrace the notion of entrepreneurship, trying to create this entrepreneurial culture within a large, complex organization.
How can Arizona businesses get in on the global economy? Are there entry points for them?
Well, I think that one of the predictors of entrepreneurial success is to think globally as you develop your new venture. I mean, you might be starting a little coffee shop in maybe a downtown office building, and even though your immediate market of customers might be in a 6-block area, if you're thinking globally, you're also thinking about sourcing, thinking about products and services that might be attractive to your customers that aren't available on a local or domestic kind of market, and even seeking services from outside of our borders. I mean, one of the paths to recovery for the U.S. is to increase their exports and to create policies that are more conducive to U.S. companies exporting their products and services. So even very small businesses today need to have what we call at Thunderbird a global mindset, to be thinking globally about virtually everything that they do in their organization.
Most interesting discussion. Professor Steven Strauser of Thunderbird School for Global Management in Phoenix. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks for having me.
The atmosphere in national politics has been rancorous for a decade or more, but that